Welcome to the Healist podcast. I'm so excited to have Crystal today. I want to tell you guys, I have had the luck of getting to meet her here locally in Boise, where I live now. And I met her through a little mastermind group we did one day. And then we got in this conversation and she was telling me about her work. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to experience this. And I have been blessed enough to have a few sessions already with Crystal. So I'll let Crystal Castle tell you what she does, but welcome, Crystal. I'm so excited to have you here. Tell us
Thank
a
you
little
so
bit about
much.
you. Yeah.
So happy to be here. I feel so honored to be able to share. So, I am the Reiki medicine woman. I am a holistic healer, medicine woman. I have a background in trauma-informed bodywork for nearly 20 years. I've been in the field of healing, and my joy is just working with women, especially to heal trauma, anxiety, depression, and really dive deeper than what traditional massage therapy and talk therapy can do.
Yeah, I love that. So you're trauma informed with the body, is that what you said?
Yeah, so I practice what's called trauma-informed body work.
Hmm.
And it's really looking at people as a whole, body, mind, and spirit, not just the physical. And so, um, part of what I've noticed in that other typical healthcare practitioners, like if you go to a massage therapist at a chiropractic office or physical therapy, for example, they will focus on the structure. They'll
Okay.
focus on the muscles that are hurting you, but they rarely ever ask you about what emotions are you feeling, what stressors are in your life, what other emotional trauma aspects might be going on that are actually also informing the tissues. And they just kind
Mhm.
of bypass that because it's not scientific, it's not a specific little cookie cutter thing that they can, tag and say, oh, okay, I can do that. And so they tend to just kind of throw their hands up and be like, oh, go to someone else for that. And so myself, what I've noticed is that I've actually been triggered by people that I've gone to for healing that have supposed to actually help me ended up triggering a trauma response,
Oh,
and
wow.
they didn't know what to do with it, and then I was just kind of left on my own to handle it. And this is really what made me decide to focus in this area and start teaching this to other people because it's so needed.
It's so important. As someone who's been in the healing arts as well, I know for years I would always focus on, as a channel, like helping people like receive information and move energy. But over the years, I kept asking spirit, like, what's the very thing that's going to help people actually heal? And I kept hearing the body, like you got to get into the body because that's where we store, right? All these emotions in our fascia. I feel like the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, I've been on this journey of trying to understand the body more as a practitioner, but also just for myself, just learning how to heal. And that's why I love what you do. And that's so interesting what you're saying about how you went for healing, but because somebody wasn't really working from that trauma-informed space, it actually triggered you. Do you have like a story about that? I would love, because I think a lot
Couple
of people
stories, yeah.
might not understand that fully, but I think that's a really important thing to think about when you're someone that's seeking healing, what to look for, in a practitioner so that you could feel really safe and supported.
Yeah, and like the hard thing is that a lot of these people are good at what they do. I
Yeah.
went to a renowned physical therapist. I went to a trusted friend who recommended me to this massage therapist. Two examples that come to mind quickly. So I not only do I have a long history of trauma and abuse and childhood trauma and all that, but recently, a few years ago, I had a back injury and I ended up having back surgery.
Okay.
Well, going through that surgery and all the pain and suffering and trauma that led up to that, then the surgery itself, going through anesthesia, which affected me and that's like a whole nother story. I wasn't doing well. I was fragile. My energy body was fragile. My physical body was fragile. I was still healing. And I was sent to this physical therapist,
Mhm.
and they're very well respected, have great reviews on Google. I was like, awesome. And the problem, especially in physical therapy offices, is that sometimes they'll rotate you through people to where you don't always get the same person. And so one time I got someone who was really, really good. The next time I got someone who they immediately started diving deep and into my back and like what just like went right for it, right to the spot. And I went like this, and I was already having like kind of an emotional day. And I was telling them like I'm feeling sad from all this pain that I'm experiencing. And people don't understand how chronic pain wears you down. When you've been in pain for 3 months, 6 months, longer than that, it deteriorates your psyche in a way that is hard to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it.
Mhm.
And so then you have the layers, right, of the tissues and all of that. And so when this woman just went dug right into that spot, and I was face down, which, being face down, you're very
What's so
vulnerable
accurate?
to
Yeah.
PTSD, right? And she went right into that spot, and my whole back just went, and the spine just contracted, which is the total opposite of what we want. We want the spine to elongate, and we want to gently coax those muscles to relax, right? To be able to receive that. And I immediately burst into tears.
Oh,
And
wow.
and then interesting thing, this is what I've noticed, that happens is, especially these people that are not tuned in, that are not dialed into the energy, they go, they have they don't know what to do. They're like, oh my God,
What happened?
and a couple things happens when that happens is one, it makes a person feel like they're the one that actually shouldn't be having this reaction, which is a quite expected reaction. Like, and then it's almost like, oh, well, you're too much and your emotions are too much, which doesn't help.
Yeah.
And they also don't know what to do. And so they're like, what do I do? And then that also is like, well, I don't feel confident with you working on me
It's
now because
almost
you
like
don't know
you
what the hell
feel,
to do.
yeah, it's almost like you feel dropped energetically. Like they're not holding space because they don't know what to do with somebody's uncomfortable emotions, even though it might not be deemed uncomfortable. But for them, it might be like, ooh, they're crying. Like, did I do something wrong? What did I do? Versus just being there and saying, oh, yeah, what's coming up for you? Now that you're saying this, I have had, yes, I've had some of these experiences as well when I had body work where I was getting some fascia worked on and I started crying like a baby, like just releasing so much. And I didn't even know. And I was really lucky. I've had different experiences where some people were really uncomfortable with me, and some people were like, oh, this is great. Like you're moving stored energy, trauma, and I'm so glad that we're having this conversation because people, when they're going through healing and they're getting these, different things, like whether they're going to whatever type of practitioner, it's so important to know that everything has a right to exist. Your emotions, whatever you're releasing, and the body is such a portal, right? What made you, by the way, get into all of this, Crystal? Like, what was your kind of calling into being, first a massage, doing massage, and then kind of morphing, and I'd love to even hear about that, but like into more healing arts.
So, really, what was the catalyst for my healing journey was a near-death experience that I had in a car accident when I was 18.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so I was 18. My boyfriend at the time and my roommate were driving to California from Idaho on a whim. We were young. We were like, let's go to California tonight, so we hop in my car, and it's around midnight, and the driver fell asleep at the wheel going over 85 miles an hour, rolled off the side of the road. We were in the middle of Nevada, the middle of nowhere. Luckily, there was a town close by called Tonopah, Nevada. It's an old mining town. There was nothing open. It's the middle of the night. The only thing that was open was a bar. And so I was severely injured. My jaw was fractured, my skull was fractured, had a 6-inch skull fracture. I severed all the tendons in my right arm. My
Oh my,
neck was broken, C2 fracture.
whoa.
I did leave my body. I didn't remember any of this. I had a severe concussion, and at the time, I didn't remember what happened. It was only upon later reflection that I went back in and I went back and retrieved that memory.
Oh,
But the driver of the car was uninjured, and so he ran. There happened to be the bar open. There happened to be two volunteer paramedics sitting at the bar having a beer.
what
So
a
they
mess.
jumped into their old beat up ambulance because in that town there's no ambulance service. It was a volunteer ambulance. So they jump in that. They come and get me, use the jaws of life, get me out of the car, throw me on a stretcher. They run out of gas on the way to the hospital. They coasted into the parking lot on fumes. They later told my parents. So angels exist, just FYI. Like these,
Oh my,
I totally believe that angels are people in human form, and these two people were angels that saved my life. And
I
I just
did
have so
fun.
much gratitude for those people that night. Yeah, so I went through um, a series of a few months of healing, and while I was in the hospital, actually, I was in a coma. And a lot of times people think you can't hear in a coma. Well, many times you can. And I actually could hear. And I couldn't open my eyes because my whole face was lacerated. My eyes were swollen shut. My ears were cauliflowered. And I couldn't open my eyes and I could hear this beeping. And it was like a beep, beep, beep. And then I heard my grandmother's voice, and she was like, why does she look like that? What's wrong with her? Oh my God, look how terrible she looks. Is she going to be okay? Like this, fearful energy. And so then I started hearing beep, 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 and it was getting faster. Well, I realized later that that was my heart monitor, and I was listening to the sound of my own heart starting to like get freaked out. Well, my dad heard that, and he came over and he leaned down and he whispered in my ear and he said, you can heal yourself. I want you to visualize purple healing light going through your entire body.
Oh my God. I might, this like brings tears to my eyes. This is crazy. So he's
Well, he
okay.
was a
Go ahead.
Reiki master. He was a
Your
Reiki
dad?
master. My dad, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, go ahead. This is,
And I was 18. And so this was like my first introduction into any healing. I'd always been a very spiritual person. I had a background of Christianity, but at that time I turned my back on God. I was like not into a spiritual sense at all when this happened. And so I visualized that purple healing light going through my body. And then I ended up waking up in the hospital in Boise. They had life flighted me. First, I was in Las Vegas University Hospital for a couple weeks in the ICU till they could stabilize me. They shipped me off to Boise. And then I woke up and I was like, where am I? Like, what's happening? And it was a month later. And I had just, prior to that car accident, I had just taken my senior photos. And I looked so beautiful in the photos. And my mom had brought the photos in the hospital room. And because she wanted the nurses to see, like, that's my daughter, like this person that you're seeing in the bed, this Quasimodo looking, like, that's actually what she really looks like. And so when I first got up and my jaws were wired shut and I had like neck brace on and I couldn't, they put a trach tube in, so I couldn't speak because there was no pressure on there. So you have to have pressure on the vocal cords. I couldn't speak. And so I was like, I got up out of the bed for the first time and I hobbled and I looked in the mirror and I just started crying because the
oh,
reflection that I saw was this Quasimodo looking deformed face looking back at me. And I was just like, oh my God. And then that's when it finally hit me, like everything that happened. And I was,
wow.
wow. And I asked my mom, because I could write with my left hand at that time because I'm right-handed. So I had to learn how to write with my left hand and use sign language. I learned to use sign language in the hospital. And I asked my mom, like, what happened to me? And then she told me you were in a car. And that's when I was like, okay, I need to retrieve this memory. And so I remember laying in the hospital bed and just like going into a meditative state and just going all the way back in to the memory and everything that happened. And then that's when I realized that, and that's when I had the recall of the out of body experience where I left my body. I went up into space. The earth was down below and everything was black. And I was above the earth looking down. And I was like, oh no, I'm dying. I'm supposed to be down there. The earth is down there and I'm up here.
Wow.
And then I had this whole thing where my ex-boyfriend, not the boyfriend I had at the time, but my ex-boyfriend, my high school sweetheart, came to me and he said, it's not your time to go yet. Like you still have work to do. And I was like, you're right. I still have so much love to give. I have so much to do. Like it is not my time to go. And so I just felt this will to live rise inside of me. And I shot back down into my body. And then I opened my eyes. And then I started telling them like what to do. I was like, put pressure on my wounds so I don't bleed out. Don't let me fall asleep. Don't let me, like lose too much blood. Like I was
Wow.
actually telling them how to take care of me. And I was just in a complete shock. Like, I don't even know how I knew all that to tell them, but I did.
Wow. And how long did it take you to recover in totality?
I'd say about 3 months. I was in a month, I was learning how to walk again. I was like learning how to talk. The doctor said they had never seen anyone heal so fast as I did. And they just attributed it to me being young. But I know the real reason I healed so fast is because I was using healing energy.
Wow. So when your dad whispered, like, use that purple light, like you took it seriously and you started to, did you feel at that time that you could heal yourself? Like when he said, you can heal or how, whatever exactly he said, did you take that to heart and say, yeah, yes, I can?
I was just like, okay. And I did. Like, there was no question. There was no doubt. There was no nothing. I just said, okay. And I did it.
That is a miracle, Crystal. That is a wild story. That is amazing. And obviously you're beautiful. So everything must have come back on online and your face healed and your jaw and everything. But that
Yeah.
is, I can only imagine how scary that would be to feel like you're losing yourself, to something like that. But what a incredible doorway into what. So how long did it take you after that before you started to like kind of move towards being a healer and helping others?
I would say it took me a couple of years. I still had some kinks to work out. I wasn't in a very good relationship. I ended up because I mean I was young,
Yes. So young.
19. I came from a background of trauma, so I didn't have a really good idea of like what a healthy relationship or what a healthy man looked like. And so I was still kind of like trying to figure that out. I ended up getting pregnant with twins
Wow.
and went through an abusive relationship with their father. And then I ended up divorcing him and I had these twins, and I was living in Cuna with roommates, and I was still I was starting to feel spiritual again, but I didn't have like a practice. I didn't have a community. I didn't have really any guidance. I, wasn't close with my mom or my family, and so I was kind of isolated. And then the people I was hanging out with were not ideal people. And so I'm driving down the road one day, and I'd always like thought of massage, like, oh, massage would be cool to do, but never like occurred to my mind to actually do it. But I'm driving down the road one day and just I hear an ad on the radio and it said massage school and there was some like special deal going on. This massage school and I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." And the massage school happened to be like right there. Like the
Wow.
next like the next street over and something just told me just stop and take a peek and see what it's all about. And it was just that intuition, right? It was that divine guidance that now looking back, I'm like, oh, that was totally divinely divine intervention. And so I just turned and like went down the street, stopped in, talked to him. I signed up for massage school that day. I came
Wow.
home and my roommates and I told my friends and they were like, "You're crazy. What are you going to do? You're going to," at the time I had this corporate job And they're like, you're going to quit your corporate job and go to massage school. And like, what are you doing? And I was just like, I don't know. I feel called to do it. I want to do it. I'm going to do it. And so I did. And then everything, once I like committed to it and I was like, all right, we're doing this, everything in my life changed after that. I ended up moving out, selling that house, moving back to Boise, leaving those friends, starting to find my tribe, my community, my people. I found my mentor who I practiced. She is a shaman that I ended up practicing with and learning from her for 15 years.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, it
How
took me a little
serendipitous.
while, but I got on my feet.
Oh my gosh. And then I know because I've experienced your work. Tell us a little bit of what really is your medicine right now that you offer, because I know you do body work, but there's so many other things you do too. I know you do Reiki and tobacco, and so like what? And maybe people are going, "What's tobacco mean?" So maybe letting them in on like what the tobacco is, because even that is I could do a whole interview you just on like your experiences with that. But tell us a little bit about your medicine and the modalities that you use.
Yeah. So right now, I am really stepping into my medicine woman calling. So this has been progressing over the last 15, 20 years. Like I said, I was working with a shaman for a long time, and I've worked with different shamans.
Mhm.
And I do have the body work as a background, but I feel like I'm evolving into more of the medicine woman healer. And so what that looks like is I did just finish and complete my tobacco dieta with the Sapara nation of Ecuador. And my teachers were Minari and Shumanu and the rest of the tribe, which was such a beautiful experience to learn this indigenous wisdom
Oh,
and working with the spirit of tobacco, which it is a plant spirit. And a lot of us in the Western world, we don't understand that plants have spirits. In fact, like even inanimate objects like rocks and stones and trees have spirits as well. And so these spirits can be allies that can help us if we know how to develop respect and have a relationship with them of reciprocity where we give and take, and they have so much healing for us as allies.
yes.
And tobacco specifically is a master plant, and it is actually one of the most powerful medicines there is. My teacher has said it's even more powerful than ayahuasca, um,
Wow.
mushrooms, like other psychedelic drugs.
Why is that? I'm just
The
curious because
reason
I've
for
done
that,
both. I've done both Aya and psilocybin, so I'm just curious.
yeah, so the reason for that is that it's a neutralizing spirit, that it has the power to neutralize those other plants. And so in that way, it's actually more powerful. For instance, if you are on ayahuasca or under the influence of the spirit of ayahuasca, um, a trained shaman or medicine person can come and use that tobacco. Say you're like way far out there, they blow tobacco on you and it brings you back into your
I've
body.
seen that. Now that you're saying that, I never understood why they were using the tobacco, but I have seen that in ceremony. Yes.
And so, tobacco is such a beautiful medicine that is so misunderstood in the West because when we think of it, we just think of people smoking cigarettes
Yeah.
and smoking and like, ew, that's gross, and the smell and the addiction aspect of it, right? And the interesting thing about when it's used in a medicinal healing way, people don't get addicted to it. It's actually because it's, again, it's this relationship. It's building a
Mm,
relationship with the medicine where it's an ally. And when we approach it in that way, it doesn't become an addiction. And also, people of indigenous cultures that work with this medicine for their entire lives never get cancer. They never get throat and lung issues. They don't have any of the diseases that we have when people are using tobacco in this addictive way. And my teacher has shared specifically, Minari, he has shared that one of the main reasons why people get addicted to cigarettes is because they are made with the intention of getting people addicted to them. So these companies, the people that produce it, intention matters. The
Yeah.
energy aspect matters, and they are intentionally doing this so that you get addicted to their product.
Hmm.
Natural tobacco from the jungle that is used for the purpose of healing, it has the intention of healing. So people don't get addicted to it and they don't get sick from it.
Oh my gosh, that makes a lot of sense. And it's really beautiful that you're taking this plant ally and bringing it to Boise, and using this medicine that you've gone and worked with. And how are you? I'm just so curious because how do you bridge that indigenous cultural energy and that, like, it's almost like a sacred reverence to the earth, right? And you chose this particular relationship with tobacco. How do you bridge that into like everyday 3D busy life? People are just kind of like go, go, go. Like, how do you use that and bridge that in your practice?
Well, first, I want to clarify I didn't choose it, it chose me. So
Yeah.
a lot of times when we're stepping into a calling, as soon as we make the decision, like, okay, all right, spirit, I'm going to do this, all of a sudden things are going to start coming and they're choosing you. They're like, oh, okay, you signed up for this. Here you go.
Yes, I agree. That's
Um,
okay. Yeah. Hmm.
and the this medicine, the wisdom of specifically of the Sapara Nation, um, they have had this vision for many years. My teacher, Minari, he knew that this was going to happen, that there was going to be this multicultural exchange because the Sapara Nation, their elders are dying off. They're dwindling. They only have 600 people left that are alive that are from their tribe. And eventually they're going to disappear. And he knows this. He's accepted it. He's like, we've known that our tribe is going to disappear. We can't let this wisdom die with us. It
Yes.
has to go out into the world. And so there have been prophecies of the eagle and the condor, where the meaning of these two different worldviews and cosmovisions are coming together to create this healing for the world. And I'm getting chills on my
I
body as I
am
say that
too.
because this is so much bigger than me. I'm just one little part in this huge cog of this wheel that is actually spirit. And this is all divinely orchestrated. It's been prophesied for generations. And the beauty of this medicine and the honor that I hold of being a part of something that is so special and so healing for the world is just beyond words. And
Mhm.
so it is an honor and it's a responsibility that I hold to carry this wisdom into the Western world. And Minari has shared that he wants us to integrate it. He wants it to evolve and to become whatever it's going to be um, for healing. And so every intention that I'm when I'm working with people, when I'm holding this medicine and incorporating it into my own body work and craniosacral and Reiki and these different modalities is for not only for the healing of the person that I'm working with, but for the planet and for everyone on it, all the beings. And
Mhm.
so to answer your question about how I'm bridging that into the daily and the mundane is I did this dieta. I did a 6 month container and mentorship with the Sapara tribe or nation. And I did two separate dietas. So the first time I went to the jungle, I drank the tobacco, um, did my journey, and then we went back to the Andes Mountains and just recently in February. So I just completed that second dieta. And so now that I've really worked with this medicine and developed a relationship with it, now I connect with it almost daily. And I'm using it in a smoke form, usually where I'm blowing the smoke to the four directions, or I'm blowing it on my clients, or I'm blowing it on myself to help ground. Because what the tobacco does is it brings us back into the center of our life. It removes fear, anxiety, depression. And this is why people smoke cigarettes, right? Because actually the tobacco itself still does have that ability to to de-stress, right? It has that nicotinic acid and it clicks into those receptors. And that's why when people are super stressed out, they don't smoke a cigarette. You don't need to do that anymore, though. With this medicine, having this walking in right relationship with this medicine, it helps to still do that, but do it in a so much more powerful and grounded and connected way. Like before we got on this call, you saw I grabbed my tobacco. I
Mm-hmm.
cleansed myself. I blew the smoke, and then it just brought me right back into the center of my life. And that's one of the main teachings that Minari has tasked us with sharing is that um, being in the center of our life, walking a good path, leaving a good story is how we are going to heal this planet.
I love that so much. So when you have somebody come to you and you know they're really stuck or they're having a really challenging time in their lives, what would you suggest that, like, for our listeners, like maybe they don't get to be in your physical presence, maybe you have online services, but like if you were to like meet somebody or tell somebody where they need to get started if they're really stuck and maybe they don't know, because I love what you're saying to be the center of your life, which to me is to embrace the isness of life, to not resist, to try and find flow. But this has taken me years to get to this point, and I've been on the spiritual path for many, many years, right? And so it sounds very simple, but it can be one of the most challenging things to do, right? Where there's just so much going on. So for somebody who's listening that is stuck, where do you suggest they start their healing journey? Or what would be like a tip that you would give them?
Mm, that's a really good question. And there's so many things I could say because everyone's different and everyone's story and situation is different. But I think for me, what what I have found that has carried me through those difficult times and brought me back into the center of my life and really helped me to start on the healing path is connecting with my guides, connecting with my spirit, my soul, remembering that we are a spiritual being inside a physical body. First
Yeah.
and foremost, because when we get stuck in the day to day and the stories that we tell ourselves and the negative beliefs and the traumas and the chaos, right? It's like all this chaos. We forget that that's not actually the truth of who we are. The truth of who we are is a spirit inside a body. And
Mhm.
so if we can connect to the spiritual self, connect to our higher self, our angels, our guides, our ancestors, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it, whatever that looks like for you, what it does is it gets us out of that that thinking that led us there. It gets us out of that chaotic and it brings us back into that river of peace that is ever flowing.
Mhm.
And the easiest way to do that is through meditation. You know,
Yes.
they say that prayer is speaking to God and meditation is listening to God.
Mhm.
And we don't listen enough. All we do is talk. We just
Mhm.
want to talk about our shit, talk about the problems, talk about this, talk about that. We rarely take the time to listen. We
Mhm.
don't listen to ourselves, our bodies, what we need, what we're feeling, and we don't listen to our spirit. And so meditation, and people tell me, well, I can't meditate. My mind's just always thinking and running around, and I'm just not good at meditation. Okay, first of all, nobody's good at meditation, right? Like, unless you're a monk living, in a monastery somewhere that has grown up always, in Zen mode, if you're living in the Western world or any sort of modernized world, chances are you're not going to be good at meditation. It is a muscle that has to be flexed.
Mhm.
You can't just expect to go and lift, a 200-pound dumbbell if you've never worked out before. You have to work up to that. You have to flex those muscles and grow. And we have pretty much conquered the external world, but we have yet to even begin to conquer our internal world. And so it starts within. It starts by creating space to listen, to connect, to like, who am I really without these clothes, without the skin, without this external experience. Who am I? What am I? I'm a
Mm,
spirit inside of a body. And
mm,
once we connect to that, then we can begin to say, oh, okay, well, everything changes, everything flows differently.
mhm. Yeah, I love that. And I'm curious for you as you're listening in your life right now, as you're stepping into being the medicine Reiki woman and you're bridging how you said this kind of cross-cultural, like you're taking one culture, bringing it here, but really integrating it. What are you hearing right now when it comes to like your own journey? You don't have to go like, you don't have to share too much if you don't, if it's too personal, but I'm just so curious because I feel like there's this wisdom brewing in you? So like what are you hearing right now?
Ah. Hmm. I'm hearing that it's now my time to step into the role of the teacher. It's time for me to lead. It's time for me to teach. It's time for me to share my story, to help others because I've been working on one-on-one with people, like I said, and I've been really like in it. I've been like kind of like zoomed in at like the pinpoint level.
Mhm.
And now what Spirit is asking me to do is to zoom out and look at the bigger picture and be like, okay, how can I support more people? How can I help more people? How can I walk a good path and leave a good story and leave a legacy that is going to ripple out into the world? It's not just going to affect one person, it's going to affect millions of people. And so I'm really hearing like, okay, it's time to let go of your limiting belief of being scared to show up, being scared to be seen, being scared to speak your truth. I'm still working on overcoming those things as well. And then what happened? You invited me onto this podcast, right? It's like I said, okay. And Spirit was like, okay, here you go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful how serendipitous life can be when we set intentions and we say to our life, within our lives, I want to heal or I want to show up or I want to do these different things. And we are given these opportunities, but we do have to be listening and paying attention. Otherwise, it could just pass us by, right?
Totally.
And so with when you're talking about helping people heal, and you've been through so much. I know some of your stories. I knew that you had back surgery, but I'm hearing about your near death, and you have all this really rich material that you're serving from, right? Like you have, I do believe some of this is just my personal opinion, but some of the best healers are the ones that have been through a lot. Like they came to this reality, experienced a ton of trauma, and there's probably points in time where some of our listeners might have had a lot of their own trauma. And they're going, why is this happening to me? And it's really at some point you realize it happened for you because you're supposed to step into the greatness of who you're meant to be. And it doesn't mean you have to be a healer, but it does mean that there's this opportunity to really alchemize and love yourself, right? So with you and all the things that you've been through, it really feels like it's created this richness. You're talking about teaching and sharing, which I think would be amazing. But when you're thinking about healing and helping people, what does healing really even mean to you now at this point after all these things you've been through?
Thank you so much for asking. And that is something that I've asked myself many times over the years because I used to think that healing was like this destination. And I was just going on this journey and I was going to get to this destination and then I was going to be healed.
Yep. I'll be
And
good.
yeah, and that's such linear thinking and that's such a limiting mindset. Because what I've experienced now is that I feel like healing is ever evolving, and really it's about coming back to our true selves and being able to hold that with consistency, right? And not being knocked off our rocker by the things that come into our life. And For example, I recently had a really horrible experience happen to me. I was sexually assaulted, and I it took me a while to be able to navigate that and to kind of be able to heal from it. But because of everything I've gone through and because of all the tools and the community of support that I have, I was able to get through that in a much shorter amount of time. Whereas in the past, maybe that would have taken me many years and it would have just dragged and followed me because I didn't want to deal with it and I wanted to forget about it or bury it or whatever.
Oh,
Because I just was like, okay, like we're doing this. And I allowed myself to go through the processes of it, of going through the grief and the fear and the shame and like all the things that come up where now like I'm solid. Like I'm propelling forward. Like this is motivating me to do more and to go even more into who I am and to do what I'm doing. It's lit a fire under me and I'm letting that fuel me rather than hold me back. And so for me, like that feels like healing to me. Not giving my power away, not living in fear and not, living in that limited mindset and allowing it to really ignite my passion for inspiring others. That didn't, it might have knocked me off for a little bit, but I am still here. I am back and I'm stronger and I'm better than ever. And that to me is like what healing is. And maybe some people call that resilience.
well, I think that is part of healing. And I'm sorry that that happened to you. And I think for our listeners, I think you're bringing up such an important point that people get confused and think there's a destination, that they're going to arrive somewhere and that all of a sudden nothing's going to bother them or they won't find themselves in challenging situations, that it's almost like they're buffered from certain things. And that is really far from the truth in the sense that this life we're always going to have challenges, right? Because every time you reach to a higher state of consciousness, there's going to be things that are happening that are going to test or trigger you, good or bad, right? And what you're saying is that because of coming home to yourself, because of your consciousness and the work you've done on yourself, you were able to work with it and be with this trauma in a different way than you would have in the past, right? Like where it might not, because also what you're saying, and our listeners may find themselves in this, is if you have been sexually assaulted or abused or something terrible happened to you, a bad relationship, whatever it may be, I've seen it in my own practice where people for years are still telling the same story and they're still looking through the lens of that wound, right? And talking about it and creating realities from there. And what you're saying is, I didn't have to go for years and years doing this because I actually let myself really be in it. And that's so powerful, you guys listening, because to what Crystle's saying, most of us want to bypass that part. It's like, ooh, this is yucky. This is icky. I don't like feeling like this. And that's actually the medicine is like when you're in the discomfort, when you're in the grief, the shame, all the things, is just to allow it so it can pass through. And so what you're saying is so vital for our listeners to understand is that healing is not a perfect place that you're going to arrive to. It's about feeling deeply connected to who you are, no matter what's going on, and having the ability, the resiliency, like you said, to move through it and to become stronger for it and
Absolutely.
to help
And
others,
connect
right?
to spirit and source. Like if I didn't have a spiritual practice, if I didn't have my guides, my ancestors, my teachers, my communities, physical and spiritual, that would be a different story. I've worked really hard in my life to eliminate chaos. Some people thrive in chaos and then they wonder why shit happens to them. And then they wonder why their life is,
They're
they
attracting,
can't
yeah,
get back in. And it's like,
yeah.
okay, like I have intentionally created a life that is for the most part stress-free, drama-free, very peaceful. And so that has served me very well. And that when chaos does come in, I'm able to be like, okay, I'm not alone. I don't have to do this alone. I can call on my angels, spirit guides, ancestors. I can call on my friends, my community, the people that I've actually developed relationships with, and I can call and say, help me.
Mhm.
I'm not doing good right now, you know? And I'm very blessed to have that, but I also get to take credit for that and say, actually, you know what? I did this. I intentionally created this, and now I get to reap the rewards of that. I've been a healer for many years, and I'm usually the one that people come to. I'm that friend that they're like, I'm not doing good. Can I come over? And so to as a healer, it's also important for us to have healers, right? That can hold us, that we don't have to do this all alone. And I do identify with the archetype of the wounded healer. And I
Mhm.
used to like put other healers that I admired on a pedestal. And I would be like, oh my God, well, they have it all together and they're so beautiful and amazing and wonderful. And look at all that they've done. And like, oh my gosh. And what we have to realize is that these people are human. Not everything is always glossy and wonderful and beautiful on the outside. They're also going through shit on the inside. They're dealing with their relationship issues. They're dealing with their mother wound or whatever. And so to instead of putting these people on a pedestal, to just like be able to see them as just mirrors and reflections of us and being like, oh, okay, well. And so I think it's important for us to also share these the shadow or these the
Yeah.
underbelly that doesn't often get shown.
Yes, I agree that there is strength and vulnerability, and that we're coming into an era where it's really important that we don't pedestal a spiritual healer, that we see them as the best healers are the ones going through their own process behind closed doors. And they're consistently, I love how you use that word consistently working on integrating their shadows.
Mm.
Because if they're really, really good healers, that means typically there's some level of ambition where they want to be their best selves. So when you want to be your best self, you will, like, as you climb into higher states of consciousness, there will be new challenges and new things that your human mind is going to be like, oh my God, how do I receive all this? Or how do I have this amazing relationship? It's not even so much the a bad thing per se. It's like, how do I receive this much love? I've been working on this for all these years. That was one of my things when I was, with my fiance. It was like, oh, I worked so hard to get into healthy relationship with myself first, then with somebody else. And then when I finally had it, it was like I was at a new level and I had to be like, okay, how do I open my heart to really receive this and sustain it? To not go into old patterns of sabotage. And so we're always working, right, to come home and be, like you said, our authentic selves and consistently be able to do it. I love that. Two last questions for you because I'm loving this conversation. With what you're learning about the tobacco and being a medicine woman, where do you see the future of healing going right now?
Mm. Well, in the West, I can speak for, especially in the States, the United States, I see so many people waking up. They are realizing the benefits of meditation, of breath work, of yoga, of the spiritual aspects of our life. It's finally like starting to wake up. People are starting to get on board. It's not so woo woo anymore.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more acceptable, and I really see and my vision and hope for the future is that we can really be able to see people as not just physical bodies, not just as a mental mind, but as a whole spiritual being, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. And we everything is so compartmentalized right now. Like we have all these different like subcategories that are like highly specific, and you have to go to see this specific ologist and this specific ologist, and like we're getting like it's too condensed. And I feel like while yes, there is some good that comes from that hyper focus, it's also can be detrimental. And what I really see is that people are going to start opening up their vision a little more and into a more holistic approach. And they're not going to be so hyper zoom focused on the minuscule things. And they're going to start to be like, oh, okay, maybe we can approach healing from a more holistic view where we're not just focusing on one part.
Yeah,
And I think that is going to be so, so helpful.
I agree wholeheartedly. Crystal, this has been such an enlightening and fun conversation. If somebody wants to work with you, how can they find you? And do you have any current things that you're doing right now that you can share with our listeners?
Absolutely. So right now I am on a new Instagram page I just started recently. It's called The Reiki Medicine Woman. You can find me there. I still have my business page, Prism Bodywork as well. And my website, you can find me prismbodywork.com. That's Prism bodywork.com. Right now, I am launching my Intuitive Touch Energy Medicine course that is launching April 26th. So I've got spaces for 8 dedicated healers who want to amplify their clients' transformations and learn my modality that I've been perfecting over the last 20 years. It incorporates cranial sacral therapy, uh, Chinese medicine practices, Thai massage, Reiki, energy work, shamanic work. So it's kind of like this whole bag of all of these things that I've learned and created this amazing modality. So it goes beyond just typical Reiki. A lot of times people will take a Reiki workshop on a weekend and then they're sent out into the world and they're like, I don't really know what to do with this. So this is actually a more in-depth course. This is a 6-month program. And I'm going to be walking people through every step of the journey. They're going to have mentorship with me, group community support. So this is a really, really big deal. So if you want information on that, you can find it on my website or you can message me on Instagram. Happy to share that with you. I also have a sacred medicine circle for those people who are wanting to develop their spiritual connection. In this group, I talk about dream interpretation and the importance of dreams, things like creating a sacred altar space, connecting to your spirit guides and angels. And so that's another container that people can join me in if they're wanting a spiritual mentor and guide. Happy to do that as well.
Oh,
And then, of course, cacao ceremonies. I've also been working with plant medicine cacao. We didn't really talk about much about that, but I am offering, I'm going to be starting to do online cacao ceremonies, but I'm also offering in-person cacao ceremonies as well. And I'm teaming up with other practitioners to do that. So if you're a practitioner that you want to work with me, send me a message, reach out, and let's see if we can collaborate. The next one coming up is going to be on Easter with Salma Raven. She's an amazing healer here in Boise, and we're going to be hosting that at the Womb Room, and which is her amazing space. And so I'm just so excited to be holding space for these amazing events. And then, of course, I do work with people one-on-one for healing as
locally.
well.
Yeah. Locally and online?
What's that?
Locally and online.
Locally and online. So yeah, so if you want to receive a distance healing session, you can do that. You can come see me in person here in Boise, Idaho. And my goal for the future is to start traveling and teaching workshops and retreats globally. So that's on the horizon as
Oh,
well.
fun. Thank you so much, Crystal. I will post all the links in the show notes and just thank you so much for sharing all your beautiful wisdom today.
Thank you. So good to see you.
Likewise.